All right, let's get it going here. The Panther-Lair Post-Game Show. The aftermath of Pitt. Season coming to an end with a loss to Xavier. 11-point loss, 84-73 is the final. And all things, good or bad, must come to an end. And I think this thing in particular that we call Pitt basketball 2022-23 was a pretty good thing, all things considered. And eventually, and I probably should wait a few minutes and let people kind of jump in here, but eventually the season was going to come to an end. Yes, SVC lacks 38. I said tune in now and made everybody wait 3 minutes, but we had announced the start time as 2:30, so in case people were taking a few minutes to join in, I wanted to give everybody a chance to get ready. You knew the season would come to an end at some point. You knew it would end with a loss at some point. You knew that loss would likely be disappointing, probably frustrating, probably a game where you would look at and find lots of moments where the team could have won or could have made a better stand or could have given themselves a better chance. Missed opportunities, blown shots, poor decisions. These things are inevitable. I think you knew it was going to come down to this. It was going to come down to a game like that where Pitt just straight up got beat. And today they ran into a better team. They ran into a really good Xavier team that can score really well and has some really good offensive players, and then, had some guys go off probably even more than they typically do, like Adam Kunkel, who goes 5 of 5 from 3 in the first half and 0 of 5 from the floor in the second half. But Xavier got what they get from their best players. Xavier got some step-up performances like Kunkel, and that's the kind of thing that gets you to advance in March. That's what gets you to advance in the NCAA tournament. Pitt didn't get those step-up performances. And I was thinking about it during the game. Jeff Capel had said, I think after the Iowa State game, he said, we've been a good defensive team all year, just not for the last month. I mean, I think the reality is when they've run into good offensive teams and even average offensive teams, they've given up points. Teams have shot well against them. They shot the three well against them. There's obviously an advantage in the paint for a lot of teams against Pitt. What really happened earlier this week, what happened against Mississippi State and Iowa State, is they ran into two bad offensive teams. Two teams that were very good on defense, but two teams that were not very good offensively. And so Pitt, I don't want to take all the credit away from Pitt. I mean, even bad offensive teams can go off if you don't defend them well, and so you give Pitt credit for defending those two teams well. But when they ran into a good offensive team, a team that can score like this team can, this Xavier team, a team that can shoot like this Xavier team can, a team that shares the ball like this Xavier team does, I mean, there's a reason they were the top offensive team in the Big East and one of the best offensive teams in the country this year. You run into a team like that, and you don't defend well, or even you defend back closer to your season average, which I think Pitt was far more like it had been all season defensively in this game than they were, earlier this week against two bad offensive teams in Mississippi State and Iowa State. You see what the result ends up being. And I thought, I kind of expected it going in. I kind of expected Pitt to struggle defensively. I thought they would give up points and a high shooting percentage, and Xavier finished 47.6% from the field, 33.3% from three, although a whole bunch of that, I mean, it was really a first half, second half. I mean, the first half, Xavier was 7 of 14 from three. They shot 53% from the floor. Second half, they shot 40% and only made 1 3-pointer. They were 1 of 10. And so it was really a first half, second half. But I mean, where the numbers ended up being, with 48% from the field and 33% from three and 22 assists on 30 made baskets. I'm talking about Xavier's numbers here. 42 points in the paint, Nunji scoring 18. I mean, this is, that's what I kind of thought would happen. What Pitt needed to do in this game, and what I said going into it, why I thought Pitt had a chance, is I thought they would be able to score as well. This might be a track meet, but I thought they could compete in a track meet. I thought after 2 games where they were dragged down into the muck, where they competed in rock fights against good defensive teams, I thought playing an offensive game would finally almost be a bit of a relief for this team, and they would make shots and they would be in it. And it might end up being 79-78 or 82-81 or 82-80 or something like that, but they would go blow for blow and play well offensively. And that's what was ultimately missing in this game. And what they couldn't afford, given how they were defending, they couldn't afford to go stretches without scoring. And there was a stretch in the first half where I even wrote it down sort of possession by possession. Nike Sabandi hit on a drive around the 13-minute mark to put Pitt up 15-14. And after that, Pitt only made one basket on its next 7 possessions. They couldn't afford to have a stretch like that. And by the time it finally ended and Blake Hinson hit a 3, that one coming out of the media timeout where we didn't actually see it, it happened while they were not back from commercial yet. By the time that happened, Pitt was now down 10. They'd gone from being up 1 to down 10 with only one basket made over that 4-minute stretch. They couldn't afford to have stretches like that. They needed to be on point. And so then they get to the second half and Nunji gets in foul trouble and he ends up sitting out about 4 minutes, almost 5 minutes. They needed to capitalize there. His presence inside was making it very difficult for Jamarius Burton and Nelly Cummings and even Nike Sabandi to do the things they like to do, to drive. I think he was, I don't want to say they were intimidated, but I mean, you kind of saw it. They were hesitant to even attempt those jump shots that they make so much. They were hesitant to try to get to the basket. And I think it was with his presence. I mean, he's a big guy, He's quite a bit taller than Nelly Cummings. If you're Nelly Cummings and you've got him staring you down, you're going to be a little bit apprehensive, I think. And so he goes out of the game for 5 minutes, and I think, okay, and when he went out, it was 53-38, I think. It was 53-38. Pitt was down 15, but it's still 16 minutes, 17 minutes left to go in the game. There's plenty of time to make it up, and now you've got their big out of the game. And Pitt even went to a smaller lineup when that happened. When Nunji came out of the game, they went with Nelly Cummings, Greg Elliott, Jamarius Burton, Nike Sabandi, and Blake Hinson. I mean, they were gearing up to score. They were going all offense at that point to try to cut into that 15-point deficit. And right away, Jamarius Burton scored on a drive, and you said, okay, that's what they need to do. The TV announcer said it. That's what they need to do. That's where they need to go. That's what they need to, they need to capitalize with Nunji on the bench. They ended up making 2 field goals during that almost 5-minute stretch. They were 2 of 8 from the floor. Opportunity missed. So they had crucial stretches where they could not go a long period of time without making baskets, and they did. And then they had opportunities like that where it just, you look back and say, geez, if you make a couple buckets there, and they were trying to drive. Burton made the layup to cut it to 13. Greg Elliott, I think, missed the 3. I think it was Greg Elliott missed a 3. And then Burton missed a layup. Sabandi made a layup, but Burton had a layup blocked. He missed a jump shot. Hinson missed the layup, and then Sabandi missed the layup. So they were trying to drive. They were trying to get into the paint, trying to get to the basket against this team without its big guy, and they just weren't able. The shots just weren't falling. They just weren't falling. And sometimes you'll have a game like that. And sometimes you can survive a game like that. I mean, they didn't shoot particularly great percentages or, particularly from 3 in the last 2 games, but they were able to survive. Probably because they were playing teams that aren't very good offensively. Playing against a good offensive team, you need to be firing on as many cylinders as possible, and Pitt was decidedly not. And then probably the final, the biggest missed opportunity down the stretch, and this was a killer. I yelled it at the TV, and the TV guys brought it up on the replay as well. Pitt goes on a bit of a run. They're down 20. They go on a 10-0 run, capped by Jamarius Burton converting an and one. It's a 10-point game. It's 74-64 with just under 3 minutes to go. They get a defensive rebound. They come back up the court. Hinson misses a 3, but Guillermo Diaz-Graham grabs the offensive rebound. It trickles to Jamarius Burton. He's got Greg Elliott right in front of him, wide open on the Pitt, right in front of the Pitt bench. Wide open. The shot you absolutely want 10 times out of 10, 100 times out of 100. You want that shot right there. And he skips it. He doesn't skip pass. He skips Elliott to try to tip it back to Nelly Cummings, who is behind the free throw line, and he gets stolen. I mean, Greg Elliott wasn't going to have a better look from 3 than he got at that moment. And if he hits it, it's now a 7-point game with 2 minutes left to play. It's 74-67. And not only is there a turnover, it's a foul, and Xavier goes down and hits both, and now it's a 12-point game again. That moment right there could have been a 7-point game, turns into a 12-point game with 2 minutes left to play. There are missed opportunities all over the place. When you lose a game, that's inevitably going to be the case. But those three right there, where they had a 1-point lead and then they made one basket on their next 7 possessions, where they only made 2 baskets over the nearly 5 minutes that Nunji was out, and then skipping over Elliott on that final, that play right around the 2-minute mark. You reverse any one of those, you have more success in any one of those situations, and who knows how this game ends up going. Team battled, no question about it. Like I said, they were down 20 with 7 minutes to go, but they kept fighting back. I mean, you could have checked out at that point. You could have given up at that point, but they didn't. They kept battling. Xavier came back down to earth a little bit offensively, and Pitt was able to make some baskets to try to cut it, and they get it down into single digits a couple times in the final 2 minutes. Just couldn't get the extra play, couldn't get the extra shot. It was 77-68 with 1:30 left to go. They made a free throw. Xavier made a free throw, and Sean Miller called a timeout. And down at the other end, Blake Hinson had a good look at a three. A look that probably falls 40, 50, 60% of the time with him. I mean, it was a decent look. You just missed. You have a lot of those moments. And for this team to beat Xavier, those shots needed to fall. For this team to beat Xavier, they needed to make more than they missed, probably, from three. I don't know. I don't know if they were going to shoot over 50%, but they needed to do better than 6 of 20. That wasn't going to cut it. 3 of 11 in the second half, 3 of 9 in the first half. I mean, they had to shoot better than that. Hinson 3 of 8. I mean, he was firing up shots. Greg Elliott 1 of 2. It's pretty disappointing when he only ends up with 2 3-point attempts. He was 1 of 6 from the floor, so I don't think you want that many Greg Elliott shots inside the arc. Nelly Cummings 3 of 14 from the floor. Jamarius Burton 7 of 18 from the floor. Those are rough stats. And I'm not going to go too far down the road of saying this guy killed them, because particularly with Burton and Cummings, I mean, those two guys, as much as anyone else, are the reason that Pitt is in the position it's in. They're the reason that Pitt had the season it had. And so you everything you say is sort of couched with that context. But I mean, they didn't have great games today, and it's not. I think it's one of those things where some of the shots they usually make, particularly Burton, just wasn't falling. Burton took a bunch of those jump shots and floaters that he likes to take, and they just weren't going down. He drove to the basket like he likes to drive, and he either wasn't converting or he wasn't getting the foul call that he expected. He wasn't converting the way he did most of the season. He wasn't getting the foul calls the way he did most of the season. And for this team, again, to win, I'm probably going to say this a lot over the course of our show here. For this team to win, they had to not only be as good as they've been all season offensively, they probably had to be a little bit better than they've been all season offensively, because they weren't, it was a losing battle to try to win this game with defense against Xavier's offense. It was highly improbable that approach would work. And I have to think Jeff Capel knew that they were going to have to win with their offense, that Hinson was going to have to make shots, that Burton and Cummings were going to have to convert, that Sabandi was going to have to provide some spark plays. And then you were going to need to get some putback points from Guillermo Diaz-Graham, and you were going to need Greg Elliott to knock down a couple threes. I mean, you were going to need everybody firing on all cylinders, everybody playing at a high level and scoring in order to win this game. And there wasn't enough of it. There wasn't enough of it, and not enough to overcome and offset the success that Xavier was having offensively. Of course, this is the Panther-Lair Post-Game. Here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Got a lot of comments coming in already, so we'll definitely get to that as many of those as we can. If you want to make sure your comment or question gets read, you can be a super chatter. There's a little $ sign down there at the bottom of the chat screen. Click that, kick a couple dollars to the podcast, and we'll be sure we read your comment or your question. We'll try and get through as many of these as we possibly can here on the post-game show. While you're here, make sure you like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Subscribe button's right down there, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. That way you never miss any of our exclusive Pitt video content, post-game press conferences, Pitt spring practice coverage, our daily morning Pitt video we do every week, Monday through Friday, every day. Just kind of get you up to speed on everything going on in the world of Pitt sports. We got a lot there. Got a lot to that we do here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You don't want to miss any of it, so make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click that subscribe button, and then turn on the notifications so you get an alert sent to your phone. Whenever we go live, you don't want to miss any of the post-game live shows or our Wednesday night live stream. You can do it all. You can get the notification sent to you, and then you won't miss anything that we do. All right, let's get into some of the comments and questions here, see what people are saying. General So's Chicken says, more upset about losing the seniors than the game. This could be the team that rebuilt Pitt if we continue to win and Jeff Capel becomes consistently good. Let's see. More concerned about losing the seniors, he says, than the game. And yeah, I mean, look, if this is the start of something, you know, if the team and the program build from here and it becomes something sort of consistently successful, and they come back to the NCAA tournament again next year, and they're playing on the weekend of the NCAA tournament again next year, then guys like Jamarius Burton, Nelly Cummings, Nike Sabandi, and Greg Elliott will sort of forever be legend, I think, as far as helping to bring this program back and being, the key pieces of the team that reignited this program. And if it ends up being a one-off, which I don't think is going to be the case, but it ends up being a one-off and they're back to the bottom of the ACC next year, I think you still have Jamarius Burton, Nelly Cummings, Nike Sabandi, and Greg Elliott as sort of, still being somewhat legendary for giving Pitt fans this great season. And I think, you always want to be careful of hyperbole, but I don't think you would call this anything less than a great season. A remarkable season, 23 wins overall, finishing 5th in the ACC, being first in the conference in the final week of the season, final week of the regular season, making the NCAA tournament, winning a play-in game under pretty high stakes, high pressure game, and then winning their round of 64 game to get to Sunday of the NCAA tournament. And what I've said all along, and I've said it so many times, just being fun, making Pitt basketball fun again. It was fun to watch this team this year. It was fun to watch the games. It was fun to watch the players. I think these players were a likable group. We talked about that a lot this season. And it ranges from the seniors all the way down to the freshmen. I think they were a likable group. I think they were a group that you could root for, you could cheer for. And I think Pitt fans bought into it and really enjoyed what this team provided. Now, got to follow it up with a good year again next year. But I think as we sit here, less than an hour removed from the end of the final game of the season, I think you can absolutely tip your cap to Nelly Cummings and Jamarius Burton and Nike Sabandi and Greg Elliott for what they did for this program this year. Burton was the MVP of the team. I don't think there's any question about it. Cummings, I think, played a huge role, in the success that this team had, and I think into the postseason, he was a big piece of the wins that they got. And Sabandi as the spark off the bench, and ACC sixth man of the year. And look, Greg Elliott, his threes. Even if he was inconsistent over the final couple of weeks of the season, he was a big part of the wins that they had and a big part of the success that they had throughout the course of the season. I think you could have used some more consistency from him. He had that Georgia Tech game in the ACC tournament, but really didn't do much leading up to that and hasn't done much since then. Still, man, what could have been if Burton dished to Elliott in that situation with 2 minutes left to go? Who knows? That'll be a great what if that sort of lingers out there. Will says that L hurt mainly because we didn't capitalize on so many opportunities, but the better team won, and I'm beyond grateful for this team and this season. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Will. I think there were opportunities to capitalize on. I think there were opportunities that presented themselves where Pitt could have cut into Xavier's run. You know what I mean? And really it put some pressure on Xavier. And I think you saw it down the stretch. Xavier wasn't playing great under pressure. They didn't. Let me bring this up. My notes trailed off because I was getting some things ready for the end here. But in the final stretch, Xavier didn't make a field goal in the final 7:22. All their points came from the free throw line, and they got a bunch of points from the free throw line. I mean, they ended up with 9 points or 10 points from the free throw line, and they mostly made their free throws down the stretch, with a few exceptions. But Xavier, I think you saw them tighten up a little bit, and they weren't getting what they got in the first half. They were fortunate to stake themselves such a big lead that they were able to hold on to. But Xavier, I think tightened up. And if Pitt had been able to cut into them a little bit, like that stretch when Nunji was out, and maybe if they're able to make more baskets, maybe Nunji comes back in sooner than he did. But that 4 or 5 minute stretch when Nunji is out, early in the second half, if they made a few baskets, they cut into the lead, they get it down to single digits there, maybe they put a little pressure on Xavier. Maybe Xavier starts tightening up a little bit like they did in the final 6 or 7 minutes, and they're just not able to get anything offensively. Now, I mean, granted, Pitt fouled them a bunch in those in that final stretch, but particularly the final few minutes. But maybe maybe you change the outcome of the game if you, like I say, you put a little pressure on Xavier there for the final 14, 15 minutes of the half instead of letting them keep pulling away and making it a 15 to 20 point game, where they're able to play a little looser because they've got such a big cushion. They don't get concerned when they start missing shots. All right. Dennis Hurl says it was one hell of a season, from projected to finish 14th in the ACC to making the NCAA tournament and going 2-1 in the NCAA tournament. We're just 3 points away from being co-ACC champs. It was a very successful season, and our program is back. As a fan, I couldn't be more proud of this team, these seniors, and our coaches. Pitt is back, and we will be back next year. Yeah, I have to think that I was going to say this season has to rank pretty high in your enjoyment, value, enjoyment factor. But certainly the 6 years that preceded this, set the bar pretty low. But I think even, Jamie Dixon's last 2 years, the NIT year, and then the 15-16 year when they bowed out to Wisconsin, I think, you could probably go back 8 years. Go back to the 13-14 team that beat Colorado in the first round of the NCAA tournament. That was probably the last team that I would imagine, as a Pitt fan, you enjoyed as much as this one. I mean, I can't think that anything really compares to the success that this team had, to the fun that this team was to watch, and ultimately what they accomplished. I mean, I think this has to rank pretty high. I'm not sure. I doubt that you would pick anything out of the last 8 seasons over this one. Josh Newark says nothing but positives for this year. Absolute blast. Xavier was the better team. Yep, I think there's truth to that. I mean, I think they were the better team, and that's probably when you look back at the frustration of missed opportunities, you had chances to maybe beat the better team, maybe still pull it out at the end. And again, if Elliott gets the ball and makes that 3, it's a 7-point game with 2 minutes to go. And I think you absolutely take Pitt's chances. The way the momentum had been going, and I mean, it all seemed to be in Pitt's favor at that point. It would have been interesting, but ultimately, the better team did, they built themselves a big enough lead in the first half, and they were able to hold on to it and extend it a little bit, and it gave them enough cushion that they could weather the storm when Pitt made a little bit of a run in the final 6 minutes or so. Let's see, Super Chatter Biz says, it sucks that they lost, but this was a great season and hopefully a sign of a big turnaround for the program. Disappointed they lost, but excited for the future. Great podcast as always. Thank you, Biz. Appreciate you. I've kind of put the conversation off all season. The conversation of whether this is the start of something or whether this season will be a one-off. partially because I just there was so much that this team was accomplishing and doing this year that I didn't want to distract away from that or take away from that by talking about, but what are they going to do next year? Because they were playing so well and accomplishing so much and having such a great season that I it just seemed unnecessarily cynical to say, okay, but what are they going to be next year? But now we can have those conversations. Now we can start asking those questions because you're losing 4 big pieces. You're losing your top 2 guards, your top 2 ball handlers. You're losing your key, your big time 6th man. You're losing your 3-point shooting ace. It's not going to be easier to replace those, and you're going to have to go to the transfer portal to at least replace some of them. And we can start talking about that. I think this week we probably will, about what Pitt needs out of the portal. And I think a 3-point shooter is probably at the top of the list, if not number 1. I think you'd like to get a ball handling guard, but the recruits coming in plus Dior Johnson, assuming he's around, and he probably shouldn't tweet during games. I'm just going to say as a brief aside, he didn't say anything incendiary, but I just don't know if you should tweet during games. If you're not playing, you're not with the team, you probably just should stay quiet, watch the game, talk to your friends, text your friends, don't tweet. But, Dior Johnson potentially could be a point guard. The recruits coming in, you could have a point guard in that group. I wouldn't be surprised if they want to try and go find a veteran transfer point guard. I think it might be a tougher sell than it was this year. It was one thing to convince Nelly Cummings, a hometown guy who always wanted to come and play here. It was one thing to convince him that he could come in and be the man at point guard because there weren't many other options. There was no other option. It was Jamarius Burton playing out of position. Although I think he did an acceptable job at playing the point a lot this season. But I think that was an easy sell for Nelly Cummings. I think it's going to be a more difficult sell this coming year. Not that you necessarily have a proven option on the roster, but you do have Dior and you do have these freshmen coming in. And so it might be a little bit trickier. But a 3-point shooter, I think you absolutely need to go find that. And then, maybe another big. I don't know. I guess you can live with Guillermo Diaz-Graham and Federico at the 5 and Blake Hinson and Jorge Diaz-Graham at the 4. And I guess, you should bring Will Jeffers back. He would be another option at the 4 to give you, more backup minutes there or even something more than that. Nate Santos played there a little bit this year. They could run different lineups out there. Some of it is going to depend on whether all those guys come back. I think Will Jeffers will be back. I don't know what Nate Santos is going to do. He didn't play this year, He had a few games where he got some minutes, but for the most part, he wasn't really a factor. Is he going to say, I want to come and do this for a 3rd year? Or is he going to say, I'm going to go somewhere where I can play? So he's going to have a decision to make, like all these guys do. But I think that's got to be the offseason priority, is finding a shooter and potentially another ball handler if you can find the right guy and convince him to come in. Not getting scared off by the what appears to be the sort of young depth that you're building here. Let's see. Scrolling down, I lost my place here on the comments and questions. TJ says, sour way to end a good season. Did you hear about the locker room scuffle after the game? No, I can't say that I did. I was here getting ready for the live stream, so I haven't seen what was on Twitter. Just kind of scrolling through real quick. Yeah, I don't know what I didn't hear about that. I'm sure we'll check and find out about that later. It's sour way to end a good season. I think inevitably it was going to end on a loss. I know somebody is out there in the chat saying, well, it wouldn't end on a loss if they won the national championship. Come on, be realistic. At some point, this team was going to lose. And if they manage to come back and beat Xavier, what will they do? Against Texas. I think at some point they were going to lose. That loss was going to come, and it was probably going to be a game where there were missed opportunities, where they felt like they probably could have won it if they took, if they were just a little luckier or got the right bounce in this situation or that situation. There's never a loss. it's very rare that you walk away from a loss feeling good, and certainly that wasn't going to be the case here when it's a one and done situation where the loss means the end of your season. And so it's a sour way to end a good season, but it was inevitable that it was going to come at some point, and it did. Joseph Gates says, great year. Frustrating they didn't make more of their foul shots or timely threes. Yeah, foul shooting was a bit of a problem today. 13 of 20. Maybe that changes the complexion of things. I don't know. I don't think they missed the front end of a 1-and-1. Xavier did a few times. Xavier was worse. Xavier had 10 misses. Xavier was 16 of 26 from the field. So Pitt 13 of 20, Xavier 16 of 26. Pitt could have closed the gap if they made more of their free throws. But I think you can play that game both ways and say Xavier could have pulled away by more if they made their free throws. I feel like that kind of balanced out a little bit. The three-point shooting was a problem, though. 6 of 20. 6 of 20 from three. That's not going to cut it for a team like this that has had so much success this year shooting threes. Will says, get the Diaz-Graham twins a steak dinner and protein shakes as soon as they land in Pittsburgh. Yeah, that's going to be the big storyline all offseason, is how much the Diaz-Graham twins and Federico can bulk up. I think, with Federico hurt, the Diaz-Graham twins were thrown into the biggest situation possible. They were thrown into that most high-pressure, high-stakes situation you can be in college basketball, and they acquitted themselves nicely. I thought both guys looked like they belonged. They got beat up. They got pushed around. But Guillermo had 11 points today. 4 of 7 from the floor. Jorge scored 7. 2 of 3 from the floor. He made a 3. Guillermo had 11 points and 8 rebounds. What was he? Oh, and only 1 turnover. So I think those guys, you look at boosts into next year or things you're going to take confidence from or things you're going to feel good about. That's a huge one right there. How the Twins played and how they evolved and grew and developed over the course of the season, and particularly in this postseason. I think those guys took some major steps toward growing up, probably starting with that second half against Duke in the ACC tournament when they had to play a lot because Federico got hurt. And then in these 3 NCAA tournament games. Pitt got beat in the paint pretty bad. They gave up 42 points in the paint. Some of that is on the Twins, some of it's not. They obviously got out-muscled at times all year long and certainly in the postseason. But I think on the whole, they were good. I think on the whole, they played well for the situation and for being in it for the first time and going up against experienced players who have done this kind of thing before, who are really good. I think they faced some good ones. Guillermo had to take on Tolu Smith in the Mississippi State game, and then Nunji tonight or this afternoon, and acquitted himself nicely. Nunji still ended up with 18 points, and but only 3 rebounds. So good for Guillermo on that one. But I thought those guys did well for themselves. Let's see. Let's get through as many of these comments as we can. Captain Pitt says, this was a fun team to watch. Thank you to the team for an enjoyable season. Joseph Gates says, defense was way better in the second half, but not enough, but great year. Looking forward to next year. Byron Nelson says, Pitt had very poor guard play today. Jamarius Burton, 7 of 18 from the floor. Nelly Cummings, 3 of 14 from the floor. First half, Cummings was 1 of 7. Burton was 3 of 7. 4 of 14 from your 2 lead guards, 2 guys who you count on. That's going to dig you a hole, and it's ultimately what helped dig Pitt a 14-point hole at halftime. Both guys were a little better in the second half. Cummings was 2 of 7 from the floor as opposed to 1 of 7. Burton was 4 of 11 from the floor. You still didn't get what you needed out of them. And there were times where I thought both guys, Cummings and Burton, both forced it a little bit, where they wanted to, particularly Burton, wanted to take over the game the way he has taken over games all season long. And he was trying to do the things that he's done in these games where he's taken over and willed Pitt to victory and made sure that Pitt didn't lose. If it was a lead, he made plays to protect the lead. If they were trailing, he made plays to come back. And he's done it all season. And I think there were points where he tried to do that again today. Some of those layups just weren't falling. Some of those jump shots just weren't falling. Maybe his legs finally gave out on him. Maybe he was tired, and maybe it finally caught up to him. Maybe it was just one of those days. Maybe the rim was wonky. I don't know, but it's basketball. Sometimes shots just don't fall, and I think for Burton, a lot of the shots he took, maybe not all, but a lot of the shots he took were shots he took all season that generally went down, and today they didn't. Let's see. Alex Getchell says really came down to making 5 to 6 more shots today. Yeah, I don't disagree about that. I think in some key situations, like say that stretch when Nunji was out, and then Greg Elliott getting that 3 that never even got past to him. Josh Newark says Pitt's weaknesses were exposed, couldn't get any offensive rebounding, shot poorly, missed too many in the paint shots, missed too many threes, didn't make key stops. Better team showed why they were better. Yeah, I don't disagree about that. Offensive rebounding, Pitt had 10 offensive rebounds, as a matter of fact. Now, they missed 33 baskets from the floor and 7 free throws. Not all those free throws were reboundable, but 10 offensive rebounds when you have 33 missed baskets. Or no, not 33, 43 missed baskets. My math is bad. They were 27 of 70. And so they missed 43 baskets and only had 10 offensive rebounds. Xavier had 37 offensive rebounds. They got out-rebounded by 3. It wasn't terrible. They did have too many one-and-done possessions. I don't think there's any question about that. But I thought they did okay, as well as they've done, any other point this season. They could have been a little bit better, a few more offensive rebounds. They only ended up with 12 second chance points, but Xavier only had 4. Now, Xavier missed a bunch, or didn't miss nearly as many shots. Although, no, actually, Xavier missed 33 and only had 7 offensive rebounds. I thought they were okay rebounding. They didn't rebound well enough to make it a positive impact, but they didn't get killed on the boards to, have it be a negative impact. Eric Bruno is a super chatter. He says it was a bad matchup, but the season was undoubtedly a success considering where the program was last season. The future is definitely bright. Yeah, I don't think there's any question about that, Eric. I mean, I think it's it was a big step forward. It was a giant step forward. One thing that I remember talking about in the offseason and last offseason and the offseason before that is you wanted to see progress. You didn't even want to put sort of a target on it. Get back to 20 wins or make the NCAA tournament again or get in the NIT or be on the bubble or this or that. All those things would be good, but you didn't want to put anything that precise on it. It was just make progress. Play like you're taking a step forward. Show that you're having some kind of positive momentum and progression. Because it wasn't there the last few seasons. Any of Jeff Capel's seasons, it wasn't there. I would look and be like, well, they won more ACC games than they did the year before. And then when they played fewer ACC games in 2020 because of COVID, I said, well, they won a higher percentage of ACC games than they did before. But it was, looking for any kind of sign of progress. Well, this year was a giant step forward. This year was a giant step forward for the progress of the team. And I think it was a giant step forward for roster construction. I don't know if Jeff Capel looked at this team and said, I never thought of doing it that way before. But I talked all offseason. If you go back and you watch the morning pits or do the live streams that probably things I've written on Panther-Lair.com leading into this season, I said, look, Jeff Capel's tried a number of different roster construction styles. He's tried to put together the roster in a bunch of different ways over the years, but he hasn't tried a team like this. He hasn't had a team like this, a team with veteran guards and good three-point shooting. So let's see if this team works. I distinctly remember saying that and having that kind of sentiment a bunch of times of okay, you may not be excited about Greg Elliott or Nelly Cummings, but look at the roster makeup. Look at the types of players you put on this team. Look at how they all seemingly should fit together. Let's see if this works. And maybe it won't, but maybe it will. Let's see. He's trying it this way now. And I think, I doubt that Capel looked at it and said, man, oh, maybe this will work. We'll see. But I think he has to have come out of this season with an even greater understanding of how to use the transfer portal, how to mix them in with homegrown players, and how to sort of develop a roster. He probably has a clearer idea of it and a clearer picture than he did heading into the season. I would have to think. And he's not going to be able to rebuild the team exactly the way he built this one. You're not going to find players, this was a unique team in the guys they brought back and then the way they filled in around those guys. I'm not sure that there's going to be another team that Pitt has under Capel that looks like this. But, I have to think that he came out of this thinking, with a clear idea of what he probably would like to duplicate going forward. Let's see. JPlan72 says, fun long season. Let's hope for more fun long seasons to come. Wayne Lice says, picked 14th in the ACC. Got to play 3 games this week. Great exposure. Hopefully helps future recruiting. Great season. No complaints. Dan Veloso says, looking forward to next year. Let's see. General So's Chicken says the post-game coverage kind of criticized Jeff Capel for not double teaming and putting pressure on players and taking risks and sticking with their game plan. Should they have changed? It was tricky. I think it was tricky. I don't think they knew exactly what. I think they were worried about Xavier's 3-point shooting from the beginning. And then Xavier, they were making some shots, but they were also crushing them in the paint. I think I wrote it down at one point. Where did I? They had 16 of their first 28 points. So basically the first half of the first half. It was 28-18. 16 of those 28 points were in the paint. And then I think they tried to play more zone. They tried to cut off those opportunities in the paint, and they were just getting killed from outside. Kunkel was nailing threes. It was just 3, 3, 3, 3. There's 3 threes in the final 7 minutes of the half. No, 4 that Xavier made. And I think they were all Kunkel. So if they weren't, it was most of them were him. And so, I think they tried to mix up some things. You weren't going to win this game defensively. I'm not sure there was a defensive game plan that could have positively impacted this. I'm not smart enough. Maybe Steven Gertz, our guy, can chime in on his film breakdown and talk about what Pitt could have done differently on defense. But I'm not sure that there was much in the way of a defensive adjustment that could have been made or something different they could have done defensively. They just had to make their shots. This was going to be a track meet. This was going to be one good offensive team against another, and it was going to, what determined the outcome of the game was going to be which team got its offense going better. Xavier did for longer portions of the game, and they were able to build a big cushion so that when Pitt's offense finally started rolling, it was too big to make up. It was too great to make up. Let's see. What else do we have here? SVC Lax 38 says Burton played the team out of this game. I have a hard time getting on board with that, and not because not just because I'm sentimental for Jamarius Burton and the impact he had on the team this year. He's the MVP of the best Pitt season in 7 years, maybe 8 or 9. And I don't want to give him a pass for his play today. And I don't think he was great. I think, like I said earlier, I think some of his layups and his floaters and his jump shots were ill-advised. I think it felt like he was forcing it a little bit. But a whole bunch of them, maybe even more, were shots that he typically makes. That we have gotten so used to. You had to have seen it today, too. Some of those jump shots, weren't you surprised when they didn't go down? Some of those floaters, weren't you surprised when they didn't land? Some of those drives to the basket, weren't you surprised when he didn't finish or when he didn't draw the foul and get the whistle? I was surprised. I would see him pull up for the J, and I'd get my pen out, click it, and then it would miss out, and I'd be like, "What? How did that happen?" So he didn't have his best game. I'm gonna say that. But he was trying to do the things he had done all year. And then on top of that, he was one of the guys, maybe the most important guy who got them to this point. So he gets a little bit of a pass for trying to take over the game and carry the team on his shoulders, even if at points it felt like he was kind of forcing and maybe wasn't, making the best decisions. How could he not see Greg Elliott, though? That was the one. All right, we got a lot of comments and questions here. I'm going to keep rolling through them. Oh, Bill Florigen is a super chatter, says, fun season, great group of guys to watch and root for. Hopefully it continues next season with the guys coming back. Good basketball into March again. Yeah, the last time Pitt played a game on March 19th of a year? It's 2012, the CBI year. They beat Princeton in the second round of the CBI on March 19th, 2012. Look, I mean, and they had, I was trying to see if this was the latest into the calendar month of March that they had played. And it wasn't. I think, when they played Florida, I want to say the Florida NCAA tournament game was on, where is it? I was just looking at that. Florida was on March 22nd. Actually, the Colorado game was on March 20th. When they played Wichita State, it was March 21st. When they played, Butler was the year before the CBI. That game was on March 19th. So they've played games later into the month. I mean, it just kind of depends on how the calendar of March sets up. But I mean, it was March 19th, and we were watching meaningful Pitt basketball. Like, you can't hate on that. I tell you what else you can't hate on, and I gotta talk about it real quick for one last time before we get back to the rest of the comments and questions. But our friend Montana from fortheperfectbite.com, this is incredible. I can't believe she did it. It's awesome. Montana is at fortheperfectbite.com. And if you guys have heard, she's been sponsoring the podcast during these post-game shows. Lifelong Pitt fan, family is season ticket holders for football since the 70s. She's been cooking since she was young, and she has a passion for food and local restaurants. She's a chemical engineer by day, but a chef by night, which I think there's probably some overlap there. But at her website, fortheperfectbite.com, she's got recipes. She has, she develops, cooks, and photographs her own recipes, and they look incredible. I mean, she could be a professional food photographer. But she has these blueberry lemon panther claws that she developed the recipe after the ACC championship game in Charlotte. And we kind of joked on the last post-game show that she needs to come up with something Spanish for the Diaz-Graham twins. And she did it. Guillermo's Patatas Bravas and Jorge's Churros. Go to fortheperfectbite.com. She's got 2 Spanish recipes on there in honor of the Diaz-Graham twins. How awesome is that? fortheperfectbite.com. She's got an Instagram page as well, For the Perfect Bite, where she highlights local restaurants and local brands. But go check it out right now. I mean, you're watching this video, you're listening to it. Open another browser window, go to fortheperfectbite.com, and you can look at Guillermo's Patatas Bravas and Jorge's Churros. They look awesome. I can't believe she did it. It's incredible that she did it. I'm gonna have to make them myself. So thanks to Montana for sponsoring us during this postseason run. It's been a lot of fun to have her on board, and I definitely know I'm going to check out that site a lot over the course of, for the whole time, because she does some awesome stuff there. So go look at it. All right, back into the comments and questions here. We'll finish up strong over the next 15 minutes or so. Let's see. General So's Chicken says Nelly was really off today, but unfortunately, he still had a great season. Yeah, no question. He did. He had a great season. A big part of why Pitt had the success they had this year. Golfers Ben and Papa said they weren't as strong on the defensive end, and we couldn't make a key bucket when we needed it. Yeah, and for the most part, they didn't take terrible shots. Like, I feel like most of the shots they took were shots that they've made all season. That was the thing with Burton. I mean, Burton's pull-up jumpers and floaters and drives to the rim. I mean, those were shots he made all year. And it just didn't go down today. And I mean, you take the shots that you rely on. You take the shots you're comfortable with, and you try to, you expect them to fall again. And they didn't. They didn't today. Let's see. Dan Veloso says, is Will Jeffers still with the team? Yeah, he's still with the team. He was hurt. He was hurt, so he missed all season. He was sort of slowly getting back into it. I don't know if he was cleared for contact, but he was able to practice some with the team, some drills with the team late in the season. But yeah, he's still with the team, and I think the expectation is he'll be with the team next year. We have to always kind of couch it with that, with the expectation is, or it seems like, or we believe he will, or all this kind of stuff, just because you don't know. I think we're at a point now where we should not be surprised by any transfer decisions. I mean, John Hughley went in the transfer portal. Jordan Addison went in the transfer portal. I don't think we should be surprised when anybody transfers. So all these guys, and I wonder if we'll get to a point where they just all have to announce if they're going or staying. But all these guys, I mean, you wonder about them until you know for sure. Whether it's Will Jeffress or Nate Santos. I mean, I'm 99.5% sure about the Twins and Federico, but it's 2023. Are you really sure about any of it? So there's that 0.5% chance. But I do think Will Jeffress will be back on the team next year. I think he can help them defensively. I think, his offensive game, if it can finally round out a little bit and he can provide some shooting threat, I think he can be a good player. And I think I think he's a really smooth athlete, and I think he can help them. And I think they can do some different things with him on the court. I think they can find some different looking lineups and do some, I think be, maybe even a little more versatile than they were this year. Will says it wasn't all on the guards. We also got bullied in the paint. Xavier was just a better team, and we needed to shoot lights out to even have a chance. Yeah, and it didn't. I don't even know if it needed to be lights out, but it needed to be better than it was. They probably had to be a little bit better than average. Like their average. They couldn't just be as good as they were against Georgia Tech last week, or as good as they were against Florida State in the game down there, or as good as they were against Syracuse. I mean, they had to be a little bit better than they were, on average this season, because they were facing such a good offensive team. Pitt, I think, is a good enough offensive team that when they face teams like Mississippi State and Iowa State and Virginia and North Carolina, Northwestern's a unique example. Who's the other one? For the most part, these top 50 defensive teams that don't have very good offenses, that don't also have top 50 offenses, I think Pitt is good enough of an offensive team to be able to outscore them. It might end up being 60-59 or 59-41 or something like that, but they're good enough to outscore them, and that's why they were able to beat Virginia. They were able to beat North Carolina twice. They were able to beat Northwestern. They were able to beat Mississippi State and Iowa State. When they faced these top 50 defenses that didn't also have a top 50 offense, they were able to win. Now, where they ran into trouble is when they faced Duke, who had a top 50 defense and a top 50 offense. And when they face Xavier doesn't have a top 50 defense, but they have a top 10 or so offense. And so that, when you're in that kind of game, your defense isn't good enough to slow them down or get them off their pace or get them off their mark for what they typically are. I know Jeff Capel said they've been a good defensive team all year and they just hadn't played like it for the last month, but they looked like it earlier this week. I mean, they were playing bad offensive teams earlier this week, and I think that has a lot to do with it. They played a very good offensive team today, and it went about as I expected. The difference in this game was always going to be whether or not Pitt could make their shots. And they didn't. And they lost. Try and get through as many of these comments and questions as we can. Byron Nelson says if they drove to the basket more, they would have had them in early foul trouble. Well, I mean, that was a thing, too. I was just going to read through a bunch of comments. But, I mean, Byron, I'll reply to that. Jamarius Burton had, what did he finish with? 18 field goal attempts. He was 7 of 18. He only had 3 free throw attempts. Jamarius Burton wasn't, those 18 shots weren't all, jump shots and three-pointers. He took, 1 3-pointer? He had a handful of jump shots, a handful of floaters that he likes to shoot, but he was driving a lot. He was going to the basket. And the shots weren't falling, and he wasn't getting the calls. I mean, Jamarius Burton only shooting 3 free throws in a game. I'm going to scroll through real quick and look at his season this year, because I got to think that's one of the lowest totals. Oh, actually, no. No, he typically doesn't shoot a lot of free throws, actually. Mississippi State, he didn't shoot any. Duke, he shot 3. Georgia Tech 1. Miami 2. Notre Dame 4. Syracuse 3. Georgia Tech 2. Virginia Tech 2. Boston College, he shot 6. Florida State, he shot 6. Anyway, I think with as much as Burton was driving, I would have expected him to get to the free throw line more, or make more baskets. If he wasn't making baskets, I would expect him to end up with more free throw attempts than 3, but he didn't get the calls. Will says Fetty and the Diaz-Graham twins need to eat and lift like their lives depend on it for the next 6 months. I'm sure they will. Josh Newark says Tuesday, Morning Pitt win. Friday, Morning Pitt win. Sunday, no Morning Pitt loss. I think we all know who is the blame here. You're right. I did not do a Morning Pitt this morning. To be honest, I was pretty under the weather overnight and this morning. I wasn't, and even in the evening yesterday. So we weren't going to tape any videos yesterday because I wasn't feeling so hot. But here we are now. I'll take the blame if that's on me because there was no Morning Pitt. But we did a Morning Pitt the day of Pitt's game against Duke in the NCAA tournament and Pitt's game against Notre Dame, or in the ACC tournament, I should say, and Pitt's game against Notre Dame late in the regular season. And they lost those. So I'm not sure we can tie this all to the Morning Pitt, but I'll take the blame if the blame needs to be taken. Let's see. Dan Veloso says, we can all agree we didn't expect this team to go to the tourney this year, so this was a very nice surprise. Yeah, and they didn't just go to the tournament. They won 2 games in the NCAA tournament. They haven't done that since 2009, 2008, 2009. They've won 2 games in the NCAA tournament. It's a good season. Joe Baker says, hell of a season from Pitt. Very happy in my position that Xavier won. Great building block for the future. Joe Baker is our friend who is a Xavier student and a lifelong Pitt fan. So he was winning no matter what today. But he definitely has some love for Pitt there. Byron Nelson says, good recruiting tool making it to the dance. Yeah, I have to think that helps with recruiting high school kids and transfers. ZC717 says, nothing to be disappointed. Best season Pitt basketball has had for a long time. Definitely need to get more physical on the inside game. Yeah, I think there's some truth to that. I think the Diaz-Graham twins have to get a bit bigger. You know what I mean? They have to get bigger and stronger. Federico has to get bigger and stronger. But you have to like what you've seen from them so far. Let's see. Steve D'Angelo says, as the season went on, it became clear how dependent the offense was on the JB to Blake pick and pop. I mean, what I've said all along was that Jamarius Burton was the MVP of this team and Blake Hinson was the X factor. And when you get those guys working together and having, when they're both rolling, this Pitt team is really, really tough to beat. Let's see. Scrolling through, want to get everything we can here. See, our guy Steven Gertz is on the live stream. He's replying to a lot of things right now. He says hedging was so bad. Hinson was the last line of defense who was in foul trouble and also contends nothing at the rim. Yeah, it wasn't great there. I will come back. Not this isn't really what Steve was talking about, but I will come back to that stretch when Nunji went out. I mean, They had to make their run there. They really did, because he was impacting Pitt's offense so much and impacting what Nelly Cummings tried to do and impacting what Jamarius Burton tried to do and what Nike Sabandi tried to do. Just his presence was having such an impact that when he went out for nearly 5 minutes, they needed to go on a run. They needed to force Sean Miller to bring him back in with 3 fouls. Even more than, even sooner than he was comfortable doing. They needed to. And instead, they went 2 of 8 from the floor. That was a huge missed opportunity there, where they could have cut a 15-point lead, maybe down to single digits, before Sean Miller said, oh, geez, I got to get Nunji back on the court. But they were unable to do it. And they tried to drive. They tried, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those 8 shots were layups, and only 2 of them were made. Hinton missed 1. Burton missed 1. Burton had 1 blocked. And then they missed some pull-up jump shots. Shots that I think they were comfortable taking when Nunji wasn't on the court. Shots that I don't think they were necessarily comfortable with shooting over Nunji because of how big he is. And they failed to capitalize. I mean, that was probably the opportunity right there. If you make a little run there, you get it down to single digits, you get Nunji back on the court, maybe you can keep driving at him and maybe stick him with a fourth foul. Instead, he didn't pick up a fourth foul for another 5 minutes or so in the game. If you could, you could drive at him and you could try to get him into even deeper foul trouble. And then, you keep chipping away and you give yourself a chance to win. But they were unable to capitalize in a pretty big moment there. Let's see. ZC717, they definitely need to improve the inside game. Xavier carved them up there in the first half. Federico and the Diaz-Graham twins need to build some more muscle. Brendan Binns says, why did it take them so long to start throwing up threes down big when they needed a run? Also, when the game got into a single-digit deficit, that Capel T was looming large for me. The Capel T was tough. I mean, that was 2 points you gave away. I guess because you're arguing in the middle of Nelly Cummings shooting free throws. I guess they were mad about that foul call on Blake Hinson. A little bit earlier, but you're down 14 at that point, 16 at that point. It's 10 minutes left to go. 9.5 minutes left to go. You're down 16. Every point counts, but are you trying to fire the team up? I don't know. It seemed like, and then after whoever it was, Xavier went down and shot 2 free throws from the technical. Cummings went back to shoot his free throws, and it looked like Capel was saying that's me, that's on me, that was my fault, telling you, see, I don't know, maybe he was trying to fire them up or something. I'm not sure. You're in an NCAA tournament game. You shouldn't need your coach to get a technical to get fired up. So I can't imagine that was what was motivating him. But, I guess that could have loomed large, like you said, over the course of the game, late in the game when it got close. But, I think the stretch when Nunji was out, and I think not passing to Greg Elliott for the 3 around the 2-minute mark, that was those were the 2 biggest ones that I'm circling right now. Let's see. Got a few more comments and questions to get to here. Let's see. TVAX1 says, whether Fetty could play or not, the Twins were better and no part of why Pitt didn't win this game. I don't know. I mean, it's tough. Now, I mean, Xavier was doing things to pull the Twins away from the basket for sure. But, I mean, there were just way too many points in the paint. I mean, there was just too much easy finishing around the basket. And again, credit to Sean Miller, credit to Xavier for doing things to draw the Twins away from the basket. But, I mean, you needed better defense around the rim. You needed better defense in the paint. Let's see. TVAX1 says Burton needed to realize he couldn't put the team on his back and do what he could. Drive, but kick out to the 3. If that happens and anyone gets hot, Xavier feels the pressure. That never happened. Yeah, I think he wanted... I think he wanted to make the plays. I think he felt like that's been his role on this team all year, is to make those plays. And that if he can finish a few of those jump shots, finish a few layups at the rim, it's going to cause Xavier's defense to collapse on him more, and then more of those guys will be open on the outside, Hinson or Elliott or Cummings, that he can kick out to them and get those shots. But they just weren't falling. And the more the shots didn't fall, the less Xavier had to respect it. Eric Bruno says, predicting returns. Diaz-Graham twins, Fetty, Hinson, Santos, Jeffress, add Lowe, Carrington, Barnes. Dior will be nice if he stays, but we'll see. That's 10. Add a transfer or 2, and they'll be fine. Yeah. That sounds about right to me, but I not everybody's going to come back. Not everybody's going to return. You're going to lose some guys at the transfer portal. It's just inevitable. It's just a question of who. You know what I mean? You don't know who's going to leave, but somebody is. Let's see. All right. I think we will. I think we'll end on this. Willat Harris, who's not the Willat Harris on Twitter, I think it has been pointed out, says it's been a great year. Truthfully, I enjoyed it. And for a guy who's made funny comments in the chat all year long on the post game or on the live stream or whatever it is, and probably will continue to do so, that seems like a good note to end it on. Pitt finishes the season with why can't I remember their record? 24 wins and 12 losses. They advance to the round of 32 in the NCAA tournament. They win 2 NCAA tournament games for the first time in 14 years. And they put a cap on the best Pitt season in almost 10 years by bowing out to Xavier in the round of 32 on Sunday of the NCAA tournament. Nothing for this team to be ashamed about. There were missed opportunities in this game. There were missed opportunities in the season, but there were also opportunities they capitalized on. They capitalized on opportunities against Mississippi State. They capitalized on opportunities against Iowa State. They capitalized on opportunities throughout the regular season, whether it was Northwestern or it was Virginia or it was Miami or beating Carolina twice, beating Georgia Tech in the first round of the ACC tournament when they desperately needed to avoid another bad loss. His team capitalized on a lot of opportunities, faced a lot of adversity, handled a lot of challenges, and overcame them to have, like I said, the best Pitt season in darn near 10 years, which is a pretty good place to be. Thanks for tuning in on all these post-game shows. It's been a lot of fun. Once it became clear that this team might be one to watch and talk about in the postseason, I said we got to do post-game shows after every postseason game. So we had the 2 ACC games, the 3 NCAA tournament games. It's been a lot of fun to do these, and I appreciate everybody who tuned in. Thanks to Montana from fortheperfectbite.com for sponsoring our post-game shows. Really appreciate that, and discovered a new treasure trove of good eats at fortheperfectbite.com. So go check that out. And of course, the post-game shows are over, but we'll still have our live streams every Wednesday night at 8:30. Every Wednesday night right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We'll have the morning pit every day. We'll have video from spring football practice. We'll have interviews, post-game, all those kinds of things at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So like this video while you're here. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. And that's it. The postseason's over. Pitt basketball season is over. We are not done talking about it. We'll have a lot more for you tomorrow morning on the Morning Pit. So thanks for tuning in today. Thanks everybody in the chat, all the super chatters. And we will talk to you tomorrow for the Morning Pit right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.